Welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar, From Vendors to Value, Streamline Third-Party Risk with Protecht. I'm Jessica Bellata. I'm a senior pre-sales consultant here at Protecht, and today I'm going to walk you through how we can help your organization move from vendor administration to strategic value. So who are we? Well, Protecht has been around for over 20 years. We've been helping businesses, regulators, and governments turn risk into a strategic advantage. Rather than seeing risk as just something to manage, we help our customers use it to drive smarter decisions and long-term resilience. What is Protecht ERM? Protecht ERM is our enterprise risk management platform. It brings together the full lifecycle of risk in one place, from compliance to cyber, vendor risk, audit, and more. And what makes Protecht different? Well, we're built by risk experts for risk experts, with a focus on compliance, resilience, and simplicity. Our platform is fast to deploy, easy to use, and enterprise ready from day one. We've earned global recognition from G2, Gartner, Chartis, and Spark. And we're proud of our 97% customer retention rate, proof that our customers really do stick with us for the long term. So just as some basic housekeeping, the session will run for about 20 minutes. I'll walk through a brief overview and a live demonstration. And we'll follow up at the end by sending you a recording and a copy of the slides. And we encourage you to submit any questions in the GoTo control panel, and we'll respond to those questions after the session. We also have a post-webinar questionnaire that we would love for you to fill out for us. This helps us to continue to make relevant and helpful content. So if you would take a few moments to complete the questionnaire, we'd really appreciate it. So on to the topic of the webinar, vendor risk management. So looking at some of the program challenges for vendor risk, it's actually become more complex than ever. Regulatory expectations are increasing, vendor ecosystems are growing. Many teams are stuck still using email, spreadsheets, and disconnected tools to manage their vendor risk management program. So Protecht helps you to move past all of that into a streamlined lifecycle-based approach to vendor risk. We support the full vendor lifecycle from onboarding to ongoing monitoring to offboarding, with embedded risk assessments, audit trails, workflow automation, and accountability built in. You're going to get a connected process, not a series of fragmented tools. So for today's demo, we're going to talk about the vendor workspace. We'll discuss the vendor onboarding process. We'll talk about ongoing monitoring for your vendors. We'll also look at some reports and dashboards. And finally, again, you'll be able to submit any questions, and we will reply to all registered attendees to answer those questions. So let's start with the vendor portfolio health scorecard. This is the launchpad that allows you to understand how your vendor risk management program is performing overall. So the upper left, we have our health score, which is driven by the tiles that we see to the right. And these tiles make up the life cycle of vendor risk management, starting with gathering questionnaires, performing risk assessments, collecting and storing any relevant documents, identifying and dealing with any potential actions or findings and issues, and then finally the monitoring and reviewing process, which continues throughout the relationship with the vendor. These life cycle scores are driven by the data that we see in the table below. The table below represents a concept we call vendor risk in motion. And this concept is basically the idea that vendor risk is always in motion. So we need to have clear insight into the activity that's taking place so we know where our gaps are and we can take appropriate action. So when looking at the table, I can see a breakdown of all of my vendor activity across those same life cycle categories like questionnaires, risk assessments, documentation, and so on. I can quickly spot where there's engagement, but I can also spot where we have items that are overdue or where things may have been slipping. So this is where I need to focus my attention and be sure to follow up to make sure we can close those gaps. So this scorecard really gives me a strategic and tactical view of my vendor risk program. I can easily see where I need to focus my time where it matters most, and I can stay confident in knowing that my processes are operating effectively across the board. So let's now move into my vendor risk workspace. So when I go into the workspace, I can easily see that I'm able to navigate through all of my vendors through this left nav. So right now I'm looking at a list of all my vendors. I can see them and they are organized by service type, tiering, criticality rating, and status. I can also move very easily to different statuses from the left nav. I can go maybe to see all of the vendors that are in the onboarding stage. I could also move to ones that are currently active. So very easy to move around in the workspace. I can also jump to different statuses of my vendors. So if I want to see all of my appointed or active vendors, I can just move to the appointed status category. I'm also easily able to move into dashboards, which I'll go back into in a second. But just to continue down with the left nav, I can also see all the tasks that are associated with my vendors. So if I wanted to look at the actions, all the actions associated with my vendors, or all the internal forms associated with my vendors, I'm easily able to move to those areas just by toggling through the My Task area. But let's go back to dashboards now. So when I move into dashboards, I'm able to see a drop-down, which will give me a list of all of the dashboards that are available out of the box through Vendor Risk Management Solution in Protecht. Let's focus now on vendor management, which I've already opened. So let's just take a look at the vendor management dashboard. This dashboard allows me to see some key trends over time, as well as overdue tasks and breakdowns by tier, criticality, and service type. These dashboards are real-time, visual, and ready for sharing with board members or colleagues if you need to. So if we look at the upper left top, I'm easily able to export these dashboards in different formats, like PowerPoint or PDF. And this again makes it easy to share this information with board members or colleagues as necessary. I can see also the different breakdowns of the data, like contract expiry status or breakdowns by service type. I can see breakdowns by tier as well as different stages that the vendors are in. On the right, I can see a series of filters. This allows me to further slice and dice the data on a dashboard. And if I move down below, I can see a table of contract details. This is the information that's basically driving all of the data that you see in the dashboard. I'm also able to link into one of these specific records if I'd like. So beyond just getting the high-level overview, I can get very granular in terms of documentation around a specific vendor. So going back to my vendor workspace, we're now going to move into a specific vendor. So I'm going to go ahead and open up ACE1, and we can see very easily that ACE1 is in the onboarding stage. And if I look at the tiles across the top, I'm able to see each of the steps that take place in onboarding a vendor. I'm also able to see that this vendor has a left nav as well. So when we were looking at all of our vendors on the previous page, we were looking at actions for all vendors, but now I'm able to toggle just to those areas that are applicable to ACE1 only. So everything is very easy to manage and centralized in one place. So to start my process, I want to basically just complete some standard business details around my vendor. So I'm just going to go into, it's the same thing, collecting these vendor business details. This is just giving me basic information around my vendor. So what the legal name, the category, what service types they provide, criticality and tier ratings, whether or not they're associated with a business continuity or resilience process, and so on. I can also see any related fourth-party dependencies. So basically an insight into my vendor's vendors. So here, if I open up IBM, for example, I'm able to see some basic info about the vendor, but also I can see what other vendors are using IBM as a fourth party. So in addition to ACE1, I have this antivirus party who's also using IBM as a fourth party vendor. And then finally, I'm able to see resource dependencies, the ability to link different areas together in Protecht is very important. We're not a modular product, so everything is always linked, which makes all of our reporting and dashboarding that much stronger. So you can see with VRM, we have business continuity often overlaps. Oftentimes you'll have a vendor that provides you with a product that is also monitored by the business continuity team. In this case, we have a cybersecurity risk monitoring platform. I'm able easily to see what the process vulnerability and recovery time objective are. I can also see where this product is linked in other areas in Protecht. So in this case, I've got a risk assessment as well as in the ISMS assets and application area of Protecht. So again, connectivity being very, very important. We make sure that we show you those linkages all throughout the different areas in the system. So the next step would be, after we've done our initial vendor detail collection, we then can go into performing a tiering assessment. So you'll see the internal forms that are associated with performing a tiering assessment. So here we can use the internal tiering assessment questionnaire. So by performing our tiering assessments, we're able to see sort of the level of due diligence that will be required. So what we initially do is assign a questionnaire. So this would be a questionnaire that we could use internally to help determine the level of due diligence that will be required in dealing with a particular vendor. So you can see a series of questionnaires in Protecht. We do have SIG Core and SIG Lite questionnaires that come out of the box, but you can always use your own questionnaires or build new bespoke questionnaires through our questionnaire designer. So once we've completed that questionnaire, we can then move back to our details page. And this is going to calculate the results of the questionnaire responses. So each of the responses can be weighted, and then based on your progress, how many questions have been answered, and then finally, based on the score of those weighted questions, you will get an automatic risk rating for a particular vendor. So in this case, based on the weights and the score that's been derived, we have come up with a rating of high, which you can always override if you'd like, but we can use and support calculations in order to come up with your risk ratings. It's important to note also, while we are here, that we also support a very robust workflow in Protecht. So anytime you see an owner or contributor associated with a certain task, like in this case, doing the internal tiering assessment, that owner will be notified via email that they have to complete a task in Protecht. That email will contain a link that will take them right to the area in the system where they need to complete the task. So never will they have to just go in on a regular basis and find out that there's something they should have been doing. They will be notified via email, and we help you develop that workflow at implementation. You can also control workflow and notification through states. So as you move through the process, you can proceed to either close out the questionnaire or put it on hold. And these states can also trigger workflow notifications as you set them up. Okay, so moving back to the next step in the process, we'll send out additional due diligence questionnaires. So as I mentioned a moment ago, we do come out of the box with standardized questionnaires for SIG, both SIG Core and SIG Lite, that you may opt to use if you'd like. Okay, and then next we're going to move on to the left side. We're going to move into the risk assessment. So during the course of the relationship with the vendor, you will obviously continue to perform risk assessments. So we go into one of these assessments here. You can see that we actually look at categories like information security, business continuity, compliance, and so on. So we can receive feedback from those departments when determining what the risk rating is going to be for a particular vendor. So if I were to tick on compliance, for example, you will see that now a compliance assessment tab pops up. So this allows you to involve other departments in determining what the risk rating is going to be. And as I move through adding additional departments, you'll notice that, let's just go to business continuity here, that the different ratings will populate on their own, and then they will basically just roll up to give you your overall rating. So based on the responses that you get from the other departments. And as always, you can override this risk rating. Also, during the course of the risk assessment, you do things like link impacted risks. These risks are going to be pulled from our core libraries. And these are risk libraries that you set up at the start with ERM or VRM, so that whenever people are linking risks, the language and terminology is going to be the same. So this will ensure that your dashboarding and reporting is as accurate as possible. Then the next step, of course, would be adding your controls, which are also pulled from the control library. And then based on the results of those controls, you will come up with a residual rating and an overall effectiveness rating for your controls. You can also write commentary if you'd like, and finally an executive summary based on the outcome of this risk assessment. And as always, anytime there's an identified owner or contributor, they will kick off the necessary workflow we discussed a moment ago. Dismiss those changes and we'll go back. Okay, so now we've gone through the basic process of onboarding a new vendor. So if I just go back into that vendor, once we've completed our vendor details, we've done a tiering assessment, we've sent our questionnaires, and we've performed an initial risk assessment, we can then go ahead and appoint this vendor. So if I click appoint, you can see we go back to that information page. I'll go ahead and opt to appoint ACE1, and then we'll see that ACE1 is now gone from onboarding to appointed. And during the course of the relationship with the vendor, as we talked about in the beginning, you're going to complete tasks on a regular basis, things like risk assessments or monitoring and reviewing. So this would be sending out these sort of periodic review types throughout the course of the relationship with the vendor. So in this case, we have an SLA review that we want to sort of standardize throughout the relationship. So maybe we want to send this out periodically, maybe twice a year. Not only can we do that through workflow, but we can also use a functionality called auto create, which allows us to set up those sort of ongoing reviews in cycles in one place. So I can set up my reviews to go out once every 6 months. It's sort of a set it and forget it type of feature. Once I save it, it will automatically be sent out to my vendor at those 6-month intervals. And I can, of course, stop that at any time, but it does allow me to manage that monitoring and review process without having to go in every 6 months and send out the notifications manually. And again, you will be able to use workflow to notify the vendor that they have something they need to do. They will receive an email from you. Protecht will generate it, but it will come from you, and they will be able to manage this activity. We also have a vendor portal where your vendors, if they would like to use the portal, can access all of this type of information and communicate seamlessly with you through that portal. So moving down throughout the next steps of the relationship of an appointed vendor, we can raise any findings and issues. Contracts can be stored in the system. As you can see, we have a list of different contracts that are associated with a vendor. We can bring hard copies in. We can link out to outside sources like SharePoint if that's where your contracts are located. So in addition to the ability to store hard copies, you can also link out to where the contracts are. So you can also, as I mentioned in the beginning when discussing life cycle, you can upload and store any relevant documents in our system. So you can upload any attachments and again, add a linkage, but you can always store documentation in our system as well. So that's the onboarding process that I wanted to discuss with you today. As you can see, having the ability to manage all of your vendors in one place, being able to access all of your dashboards, being able to offer a seamless workflow that notifies both internal and external individuals that there's work that needs to be done around a vendor, really works together to streamline the process and to make handling vendor risk management a lot easier. That concludes our webinar. Thank you for your time and attention on behalf of me, Jessica Bellata, and Protecht overall. If you'd like more information on vendor risk management, please visit our website. We also have a post-webinar questionnaire that we would love for you to fill out for us. So if you would take a few moments to complete the questionnaire, we'd really appreciate it. And we'll follow up by sending you a recording and a copy of the slides. Thanks very much again, and have a great day.